Hello, sisters. First of all, turf mail. You didn't miss much. The entire thing was like 16 minutes. I think you got there like towards the beginning. Uh, so yeah, it was very short. Um, let's see if the rest of the reviews are just this short or just as short. The one about Catherine McKinnon, the courting gender justice, that one is pretty short. The feminism and the new physics, the next one we're reading tomorrow is like twice as long as this one. So, but all of these, the 4 reviews, they're all under 10 pages. Um, I don't have a lot to say about this because I'm like, sorry, I don't have a lot to say about this because I'm like, I haven't read the book. Also, off the top of my head, I don't have. It was funny that she, at one point in the essay, she's like, here are the similarities between socialist feminists and, or did she call them points of unity or something? Between socialist feminist beliefs and radical feminist beliefs. And it was really clear to me that she had like a super distinct concept of what they were from the get-go, and then she had to like she had two distinct concepts, and then after reading this book she was like, these are the things that we have in common. Whereas the way that we look at things, at least like I think people in women in my generation, the way I look at things is like there's people who believe that like sex work is great and that like surrogacy is great and that like trans women are women and all that. And then there's everyone else. And the fact that we're materialistic at all puts us in the same box. Like there are so many, like she mentions anarcho-feminists. She didn't mention eco-feminists. She did mention black feminism or womanism. And I'm like, there's all of these subtypes of feminisms, which the way that I've conceptualized of them since learning about them in like 2014 or whatever was basically that we're all kind of the same, but we have a different order of priorities. So I think that most radical feminists would agree, for example, that the human destruction of the planet and the environment plays a role in patriarchy, is generated by patriarchal values and institutions and stuff like that. Is it like their number one priority, or is it like the central pillar of how they see patriarchy destroying the lives of women? Not really. I think if you do have that value system, it's like you have that belief and it's like at the top. That's like you're an ecofeminist. Like I'm kind of dumbing like making it like really basic, but that's how I always thought. Like same thing with womanism is like I'm not trying to explain what womanism is, but the way I always understood it basically was like they're radical feminists, and radical feminism, because it's supposed to be like for all women, obviously has like an anti-racist like value to it that you can't take out of it. Even though there's some like white supremacist women who consider themselves radical feminists. um, but if you're a womanist, it's not just that like, oh, I'm a radical feminist and I care a lot about anti-racism. It's that like you're a radical feminist, but the fact that you're black and the fact that you are analyzing the world from the perspective of a black woman and prioritizing experiences of black women, it's almost like lesbian separatism. Like it goes very, very far into like prioritizing that. Like I know there's been women's festivals and like lands, and there's literally been like women's communes that are like black women only. Like it's almost like lesbian separatism. Like if you've never heard of womanism, it's almost like that. But so like I said, it's like they have like the same values as radical feminism generally, but they have a different like priorities list, is the way that I view it. And so it's very interesting to me. I've always conceptualized of all of these different things as kind of like subtypes, like sub-denominations of feminism, of radical feminism. And maybe that's like reductive or dismissive or something of me, but that's like given the way that I learned about them and who I was talking to at the time, that's how I came to understand them. Obviously in this, in this, well, okay, this has the Alison Jagger book on it, which I have not read. But they have like completely distinctive understandings of these feminisms as not as just like 4 different branches of the same thing. So all that to say is I don't really have a lot of strong feelings about it because it's like so new to me. I don't have there wasn't parts of it where I was reading where I was like, oh my gosh, I totally disagree with that, or like, oh, that makes no sense to me. Like, I was just like receptive to the information because it was new to me. Yeah. So what I would like to do now, because I have the PDF here, I mean, I hope. Oh yeah, here we go. So I'm gonna link it. I don't think I linked it underneath. Yeah, like I said before, I had this idea that I was gonna read the entire book that she reviewed before I read the review. No offense to her, but considering the review is like 5 pages, I'm kind of glad I didn't do that because she only references like 4 specific pages in the whole friggin' book. I do think we should read this book on the channel though, because as I've just said, I feel like I don't have a solid understanding of these different types of feminism outside of like you are in the radfem part of the internet, but you have a different priorities than I do. That's what that means to me when someone says I'm an eco-feminist, I'm a womanist, I'm an anarcho-feminist, I'm a socialist. That's what it like evokes in me. So I think it'd be interesting to read this. It seems generally that Marilyn Frye was saying Alison Jagger has 2 criteria by which she judges things, which is like, can it be generally casually explained, like what the basis of patriarchy is? I think that's what she said anyway. And the second point is like, does it lead to a practically applicable political movement? That's kind of what Alison Jagger, like, she was kind of judging and comparing feminisms on those two questions. It's interesting though, like I did like how she explained this at the beginning, which just makes me really want to read this book. By theory of human nature, she means interdependent conceptions of what it is to be a human being and what constitutes such a being's well-being. So it's not just like the way I was describing it, like let's use socialist feminists in this example. The way I was describing it was like they're basically the same as radical feminists, but for them, capitalism is like the number one problem that leads to sexism, that like perpetuates patriarchy. Capitalism is that. She's not saying that. What Alison Jagger is saying is that a woman who's a socialist feminist understands the interdependent conceptions of what it is to be a human being as having capitalism as a central role, I guess, that is like inextricable from human society at this point. And then from their human understanding, from there they have a feminist perspective. So it's not that they have feminism and within that feminism they have different priorities. It's that this is how they understand humans, and then from there they are feminists. Maybe I'm misunderstanding, but that's how I read this, and that was interesting to me. I like I was saying the other day, like I'm reading this like listening to this audiobook about like the history of politics, and I want to know more about politics. This book is primarily about the political philosophies of different feminisms, and so she's talking about like the politics, who has the power and the authority, and how do they like maintain that and generate that, and thus subjugate women. But also, how does that political philosophy lead to like an analysis or like a strategy that is political? And so this to me makes me really want to read this book, because I feel like a lot of feminism is like pointing at the problem and saying that's the problem. I can think every Dworkin I've ever read is that. It's like pointing at it and saying that's the problem. I haven't read a lot of feminist books that are like, and so this is how we fix it. Not to say that like Dworkin's never done that, but I'm just saying like maybe it's because I haven't read enough McKinnon or who's the other one all about the porn? My brain is blank. There's 2 feminist authors that I have not really read very much of, who deal like I know they were like doing legal cases trying to like get stuff done in the realm that they wrote about. Anyway, so Marilyn Frye is saying that basically Alison Jagger is like biased clearly, at least to her. I don't know if she, and now I'm interested to read the book, because I don't know if Marilyn Frye knew, like, as a person, like, as an individual, that Alison Jagger is a socialist feminist, or if it just comes across so clearly in her writing. But she's biased about it. And she also just has, like, a kind of literary analysis that, like, she says she's comparing 4 types of feminism, but what she's really doing is just comparing Marxism to liberalism. So I would love to get into, like, the minutiae of that. It's also so interesting here, like, Marilyn Frye talks about, like, Marxism. She's like, it's dynamic, historical, materialist, and dialectical. And she kind of is saying, like, she's commenting on it in terms of, like, this is what these types of feminists can be, like, Marxist feminists. We can appreciate them for, like, having these characteristics and stuff. And she's not saying that these are characteristics inherent to radical feminism, which is interesting to me, because, like, a focus on the dialectic and the praxis, for me, has always been, like, one of the definitive characteristics of radical feminism. So it's just fascinating to me. This book that she's reviewing was written in 1983. So here we are 40 years later. Yeah, Kitty Katz says my radical feminist position came from an anti-imperialist, anti-capitalist stance. Yeah, but that's what I mean. It's like, those are characteristics inherent to radical feminism. Like, you can't have radical feminism without having those values. But it's like, I guess, which one led to which thing and which one stays the priority. I don't know. I'm trying not to think of it in terms of what I already know, but think of it in terms of what was laid out here. It's difficult. What I do agree with is, she's like, Jaeger says that for political action to succeed, there must be, like, a determined and, like, clearly laid out political strategy. That, I am constantly, like, I feel like the gender critical sphere of the internet, not the radical feminists, the gender critical sphere of the internet, they're, like, fascinated with politics. They're constantly trying to engage in politics. And it's like the blind leading the blind. Like, I'm not trying to say that you need to, like, join a local party and, like, get involved in a caucus or, like, run for city. I'm not saying that. I'm saying it's like, you have never had any analysis of, like, who's in power, who is their opposition, how did the opposition try to get something done, and when were they successful or unsuccessful, and what led to that. Like, they have zero thoughts whatsoever about, like, to me, like, the Anita Bryant stuff is, like, so fucking obvious. Like, this whole Save the Children thing. I'm like, your PR is shit. Your PR is so bad with that, because, like, it evokes really bad, like, historical political precedent in many people's minds. Like, the PR is bad. The political alliance is bad, because, like, just by saying that, like, this is just one example. Just by saying Save the Children, you immediately set yourself up for for being on this side and not that side of any political alliance. So you've cut out half of the political sphere from ever engaging with you. Like, there's, like, as soon as you say Save the Children and it's involving anything vaguely queer, you are immediately right wing. And I'm like, I'm not saying that nobody should do this, or that I want to control what people are doing. I'm just saying, like, the fact that they're doing it and they have zero fucking awareness that they're doing it, you are never going to get a leftist of any mainstream, high level, power level to get involved with you if that's, like, your main rallying cry, like, ever, because of the historical political context. And so this is what I mean when I'm like, it's the blind leading the blind. Like, that's just one example that I think is, like, so prevalent at the moment. I really, but that's gender critical things. When it comes to radical feminist things, we are obviously, like, first of all, no one listens to us or talks about us, right? So I saw some horrific story about some girl in Afghanistan today on Twitter, and I clicked on the tweet, and all of these tweets underneath it were saying, where are the Western feminists? Why don't the feminists care? Why aren't the feminists doing anything? And to me, I was like, well, this is like the perfect like kind of example of the fact that we have no authority, no institutional power, and no visibility. So any political plan that radical feminists have needs to start from that groundwork, that we don't have visibility, we don't have institutional power. Like, so from there, what can we do? Like, let's make the plan given that information. So I just feel like I very much agree that I wish there was more like political strategy, political plan, like an awareness of the local politics, not necessarily in terms of like government politics, but in terms of like who has the power. Like, because institutions outside government often are the ones with the power, right? Or like social institutions, right? So yeah, I don't know. This whole chapter also reminded me a lot of, there was this maybe some of you listen to this podcast. What even is it called? I forget. There's like these two women who are both Marxist feminists, and they're very, very passionate about being Marxist feminists. And I listened to a couple of Twitter spaces with them that they were in like last winter, like 2022 winter, I think, or I don't know, whatever. Like in my last season of being on social media. And they kept saying over and over again, yeah, I don't know, is it like the RadFem podcast or something like that? But as far as I remember, they constantly are maintaining that they're not just radical feminists, they're Marxist feminists. No, I don't think that's them. One of them is like a Canadian who lives in the UK, and the other one is like some kind of PhD who lives in the UK. I can't remember. But what I remember them saying over and over and over again in these Twitter spaces was like, the project of feminism has failed. And it's kind of true in a lot of ways. Like, you look at like conviction for rape statistics, you look at like incest statistics, like there's a lot of things that feminists were talking about in like the 60s and the 70s, which we haven't really made a lot of ground on. Like, in the grand scheme of things, people talk about it, but is the actual power structure to prevent it from happening or to help women once it does happen really there? And it's like, obviously a lot of work has been done, but considering the time frame that like the patriarchal power structures that like enabled those things and perpetuated the capacity for those things to happen has been building up, we've only been really working on it for a very short amount of time, right? So these women, they just kept saying the project of feminism has failed. And they were very ardent that the solution was Marxist feminist, because they were like, radical feminism doesn't have a political plan. Marxist feminism, we do have a fucking political plan, and this is our plan, like XYZ, like first this, then this, then this. We know that this will work because if we look at like they were like super, they had, my point is, I'm not saying that we should all become Marxist feminists. I actually don't know enough about it to really say if it's better or worse or whatever. What I do know is that these women had a very clear political strategy, and I've never heard many radical feminists say like, this is the political strategy that comes from radical feminist perspective of like what we should all have as like a priority right now and how we can actually do that. Like, these women had a very like specific goal and a specific way that they thought women could go about doing it if we had like enough collective action to get it going. And I appreciated that, and I found that interesting. And yeah, so I was thinking about that a lot during this chapter. Kitty Cat says, have you ever read Maria Maya's book, Patriarchy and the Accumulation on a World Scale? Great book, which does try to answer some of those political questions and actions. No, I have not. Oh, my phone isn't over here. Okay, let's open a web page. My phone. I like fell asleep with my phone on my desk without plugging it in last night. And I woke up this morning and I was at like 10%. And then I went to work. And then I went to the grocery store and I came home. And by the time I sat down, my phone was at 6%. Okay. what's this called? Patriarchy and the Accumulation. Oh yeah, here we go. Oh, it's from the 80s. Well, makes me very likely to want to read it. All right, the typing. Yeah, I have like one of those like old clickety-clackety keyboards. Can you see it? Well, it's not old, obviously, but it's like the old style. Everybody has now like the nice soft keyboards. I like the clickety-clackety. Okay. What I wanted to do. Remember how I was like, I don't have things to say, and then I talk for 20 minutes. I guess the things that I had to say was that I'm not informed enough. I want to look at the page references in here. Jesus, it's so loud. Okay. So she says on page 10, contrary to her claims, Alison Jagger is not laying out 4 distinct political theories with 4 distinctive theories of human nature, but 3 theories and something which by her lights is not a political theory, radical feminism, which are variously related to the 2 theories of human nature. Let's go to page 10. Oh yeah, I'm going to put the link to this. This book is on archive.org or whatever it's called, or archive.gov or whatever it is. So you can just like download the PDF. 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. We're on page 10. Should we read this? I kind of want to read this. This section of the book is only 4 pages. I don't know. Let's read this, and then maybe we'll decide to end the stream. Okay, this is page 10 of Feminism as Political Philosophy, which is the first essay in Alison Jagger's book, which I will later add to the description of this, so you can read it if you want to. 4 conceptions of women's liberation. Certain difficulties are endemic to any attempt to categorize social theory. The most obvious difficulty is that theory changes constantly, partly in response to changing social realities, partly in response to new theoretical perspectives. Women's situation is changing rapidly at the present time, and feminist theory, in consequence, is constantly developing. Partly because feminist theory is a new intellectual discipline. Moreover, feminist theorists are not working within an established paradigm and consequently often challenge their own fundamental assumptions. These rapid changes mean that the present analysis can be useful as a description only for a relatively short time, although I hope that its critical or prescriptive value may be longer lasting. This kind of reminds me of yesterday's essay where Marilyn Frye was like, we can do like pattern recognition and it can be relevant, but the fact that we get disproven by it is also a positive thing and can lead us to more information. And just because the pattern recognition cannot like survive to the nth degree doesn't mean it's not giving us any information. Kind of reminds me of that. Another problem that confronts all attempts at classification is the problem of selecting the principles of organization. At any given moment, social reality can be perceived or conceptualized in a variety of different ways, and existing feminist theory provides a variety of perceptions and conceptualizations of women's situation. Social theory, however, does not stand outside social reality. It is itself a part of that reality and, like the other parts, is capable itself of similarities and differences. What kinds of similarities and differences one emphasizes depends on one's purposes in undertaking the analysis. In my analysis of feminist theory, I am not interested in a taxonomic classification of as many subspecies as possible. Okay, so she does consider them kind of subspecies a little bit then. Rather, I seek a sound methodology to provide the basis for a theory and a practice that will liberate women. Consequently, I seek to reduce rather than to proliferate theories. I am searching for the genera, the ways of conceptualizing women's situations that are fundamentally incompatible with each other. In order to do this, of course, I must decide which differences count as quote unquote fundamental, and I find it most useful to identify fundamental differences by reference to four distinctive conceptions of human nature. These conceptions, I shall show, are correlated with distinctive analyses of women's oppression and distinctive visions of women's liberation. So instead of just trying to understand like what the different feminisms are and why they are the way they are, she's like, I don't want to get into like that nitty gritty. I want to take a step back and understand like why they are the way they are and what does that mean and how is that useful. I like that. That's sounds great. Like all systems of categorization, mine may be challenged in a number of ways. It collects within one category certain views that some might prefer to keep distinct. It separates views that some might think belong together, and it omits certain views entirely. In what immediately follows, I want to give a preliminary explanation of my system of categorization. The ultimate test of the adequacy of my system, of course, will be found in the body of the book, where I provide the detailed argument for the theoretical unity and for the plausibility of the paradigms that I identify. Sorry, some random thing just. Dude, leave me alone. All this random shit just popped up on my home screen. Okay. Okay. I like never use my iPad. I only use it for like reading PDFs. All right. So this also makes you think of yesterday's essay where Marilyn Frye was like, when we generalize things, we like remove the like texture of the reality of the experience from it. And that can be really damaging and can remove our ability to do pattern recognition, right? So that makes you think, that's what this makes me think of. But she's like being honest about it. She's like, I may be oversimplifying things. I may be categorizing things together that you don't think belong together. And that could be problematic, but like I'm trying something. And obviously I respect that. Okay. Among the most obvious omissions from this book are religious and existentialist concepts of women's liberation. Such conceptions have been significant historically. Indeed, The Second Sex, published in 1949 by the existentialist Simone de Beauvoir, must be considered a forerunner of the contemporary women's liberation movement. I have omitted religious and existentialist conceptions primarily because I find them implausible. They are outside the mainstream of contemporary feminist theorizing, and they have little direct connection with socialist feminism, the version of feminist theory that I consider the most plausible. Okay, so she's telling us straight off the bat. She's like, I'm looking for things that are politically actionable. I don't think existentialist feminism is politically actionable, so I'm not even considering it. What was the other one she said? And religious feminism. She also thinks it's not politically actionable. And she considers most plausible to lead to political action socialist feminism. So, all right. Black feminism has not been omitted from the book, but it has not been treated as a separate theory because Black feminists utilize a variety of theoretical approaches. Some discuss the situation of Black women in terms of a liberal or traditional Marxist framework. A few advocate for their own version of separatism, Black nationalism. A very few are radical feminists, though almost none seem to be a lesbian separatist. And some Black feminists argue that the situation of Black women can be fully understood only through a development of socialist feminist theory, a development that integrates conceptually the category of racial or ethnic identity with the categories of gender and class. Given the variety and the theoretical orientation of Black feminism, I think it more useful to examine their contributions in the context of the four categories of feminism I identify than to present those contributions as reflective of a single Black feminist perspective. You like Simone de Beauvoir? I've actually never made it all the way through. Like, I've tried. Same with Mary Wollstonecraft. I tried, and I've even tried it on audio. It's just like so. Although I do think a lot of it has to do with my mindset. Maybe I'm more into like political, like dense stuff when I'm in the right mindset. Right. So this really reminds me of yesterday's essay, where she's like, it's important that we don't take something and flatten it to be two-dimensional because it's easier to talk about that way, which Marilyn Frye was saying yesterday. So, in a way, I feel like Alison Jagger, based on this paragraph, I think she was like, I tried to like research Black feminism and how it integrates into this like analysis I'm doing. But it's so varied and complex, and as she says, there's like Black feminists of many different theories. She can't really like analyze it as a single thing. So rather than trying to like flatten it into one thing so that she can argue against it or for its political veracity, she's gonna just take the contributions of Black women to other subcategories as part of those subcategories rather than their own entity. I'm sure many women would find that offensive, but I think she's just trying to be honest. Like, I feel like based on this, she would have basically felt that she was straw manning if she had said, like, this is what Black feminists believe, and this is why I think it is or isn't politically viable. Because she's saying, like, they believe so many different things. It's not possible for her to do that. So I think she's just trying to be honest. Oh, that's so interesting. Paul's person says, I read The Second Sex years ago, and it really helped me grow confident in my detransition, so maybe I have some attachment. It was one of those experiences where I saw so many thoughts of mine that I wasn't certain about reflected back. Yeah, that's how I felt when I read Pornography. That was the first feminist book I ever read, like real feminist book I ever read. All right. What time is it? I don't have my phone. Oh, it's so confusing. Someone tell me what time it is. Oh, okay, it's like 1. All right, we can spend a little bit longer in this discussion stream today because the reading was so short. I have something. Okay, I'm just going to summarize the next paragraph. She basically is like, I've looked at like other feminisms that are not Black feminism, but they're so varied and like far and few between that they do not describe an entire feminist theory. So there's not like anything I can do with that, basically, is what she's saying. She's like, most of them basically just describe the experience of women of that specific ethnicity or color. So she's like, that's not enough for a political theory. Okay, she's going to talk about anarcho-feminism. That's the feminism I think I know the least about. Another conspicuous omission from my list of feminist theories is anarchist feminists or anarcha-feminism. While a substantial number of contemporary feminists identify themselves as anarchists, their views do not receive a separate examination in this book. The reason for this decision is that because anarchism is such a broad term, each of the 4 conceptions of women's liberation that I do consider contains views that may legitimately be described as anarchist. Anarchist elements can be found in the liberal, especially libertarian, suspicion of the state, in the classical Marxist hope that the state ultimately will, quote-unquote, wither away, in the radical feminist attacks on patriarchal power in everyday life, and in their self-help alternatives, and in the socialist feminist critiques of the hierarchy and authoritarianism on the left. Because such a great diversity of views may be labeled anarchist, it seems impossible to justify a single conception of human nature and society that does not exclude substantial numbers of self-defined anarchists. Consequently, rather than identifying feminist anarchism as a distinct feminist theory, I shall simply note the elements of anarchism as they arise in the context of what I see as the 4 major contemporary paradigms of women's liberation. Okay, so So in Marilyn Frye's review, she basically is like, this entire section is an oversimplification. Like I said before, I don't really have enough knowledge to say that I do or don't disagree with that statement because I don't know basically fucking anything about anarcho-feminism. Yeah. Okay, there's still 2 more pages to this section. I'm just gonna like scan through. Oh, she also said she doesn't cover like lesbian separatism or lesbian feminism as its own separate category. Because she's like, again, they kind of fit, depending on who the lesbian feminist is, they fit into like socialist feminism or liberal feminism. The way she says, or even liberal feminism, like this is before liberal feminism was its own fucking disgusting Frankenstein that it is now. Kitty Cat says anarcho-feminism isn't really a political theory, but it is a political philosophy. Yeah, I guess that makes sense. Because we've also skipped the first like 10 pages of the book, right? Where I'm sure she describes in a bit more detail what she considers a political philosophy versus a political theory, like versus like actionable political strategy and all that. She says she uses analyses rather than analysis when she describes radical feminism because radical feminism is in itself a pretty varied school of thought. This is so fascinating to me. She says, the political tradition that I call quote unquote radical feminism had its roots in 2 different types of soil. In the basically liberal civil rights movement and in the Marxist inspired New Left. Because of this contradictory heritage, radical feminism is difficult to locate their distinctive insights within a comprehensive theoretical framework, and the radical feminist movement, in fact, generated a variety of analyses of women's oppression and a variety of visions of women's liberation. What unified all of these analyses was a conviction that the oppression of women was fundamental. That is to say, it was causally and conceptually irreducible to the oppression of any other group. It is this conviction that I have taken as definitive of radical feminism, and that also serves as my justification for identifying radical feminism as a distinctive feminist perspective. This is so fascinating to me because, like, I wonder if there's a book that's like the formation and foundations of radical feminism. That's kind of like a literary review of like the books that kind of like formed it. Because I know there's like The Feminine Mystique was kind of like one of the first books. What's that book by Shulamith Firestone? There's a couple of books from like the very late, like 1969 or whatever, that were like the first books to like take a step towards radical feminism. But I don't like. I remember in Right Wing Women, Dworkin talks about like who became radical feminists. It was all of us who survived the free love era and were like now survivors of male sexual violence and knew that they're like we had been lied to. So we had experienced male sexual violence and we had experience doing political action because of like, you know, being hippies. So she was like, those are the women who became radical feminists. That's like the most that I know about like who became radical feminists. She's describing it differently here. Or she's saying that there is that group, but there's also a second group. Like, what does she mean when she says the Marxist-inspired New Left? She wrote this book in 1983. I don't know. I think it's like one of my favorite parts about reading older feminist books is that we get such a different perspective on the exact same things that we think we know about now. Even though, okay, there's a paragraph here that starts, socialist feminism is perhaps the most questionable of all the four paradigms that I have identified. So even though she's like, that's the one I think is the most plausible when it comes to political action, she's like, it's the most suspicious. I think she kind of covers her ass, because in the next paragraph she starts it by saying, "It is my belief that the four feminist paradigms that I present are the most widely accepted and plausible conceptions of women's liberation that presently exist." So she's basically saying, like, at this time, with the knowledge that I have, this is my analysis. And she's like, I'm using this analysis because it is like the most accessible to women who know about this topic. Which, you know, that's reasonable. I do have like a kind of general, not even question, but like wondering, just on its face after reading like 3 pages of this huge book. She's like the most actionable, politically rigorous, I guess, feminism is the socialist feminism, which, as far as I can tell from this, she's saying it's distinctive from Marxist feminism. And that to me is interesting, because I'm like, if you are a feminist who is trying to do like what Marilyn Frye talks about a lot of time, which is like come up with our own way of describing our knowledge, our experience, our goals, our values, like to make things generated by and for women, it's pretty fascinating to have an entire feminist analysis that is based upon the work of a man, Karl Marx. And so here she's trying to distance herself from that. I'm not sure how like specious I find that, because I haven't read the whole book yet, but I do find it fascinating that she's like, the one that I find the most politically viable is the one that like incorporates the work of a man, because none of the other ones are going to claim, like, you know, that they're based on the works of men. But she's like, some people consider socialist feminism to be a relatively minor revision of the traditional Marxism, and some might deny that its revisions of the central Marxist category are sufficiently significant to warrant it being considered a separate paradigm. In my view, socialist feminism is still distinct from both radical feminism and traditional Marxism. On the one hand, socialist feminism today is very different from the most popular versions of radical feminism, which, as I shall argue later, either tend toward idealism or have failed to extricate themselves completely from the influence of biologism. Is that the old word for biological essentialism? I love that, biologism. So is she saying that Marxist feminists don't believe in a biological like root to parts of patriarchy, that they think it's purely capitalism that's led men to be horrible? Because like, again, coming from my perspective was that, like, I mean, this, I don't know of a single group of feminists who are actually in agreement on this. The nature versus nurture arguments among feminists to do with like the state of patriarchal power and the state of male violence and the state of like men doing horrible shit generally is like so fucking contentious. I could think of some huge Twitter battles where like big name feminists all like blocked each other and slandered each other because they were like, how dare you fucking say like testosterone is their excuse, and other ones be like, you don't understand like social anthropology, because if you did, you would know that like the only reason they're like this is because of like socialization, or like, to me that's always been like a very, from my knowledge of feminism, the last decade that I've been involved in it, that's never really been like a settled debate. Even among women that I really respect and admire and look to for advice or feedback, a lot of them and I are not exactly on the same page when it comes to that. And I've kind of accepted that, because I basically, the way I view it is, we don't have a control group, and we don't have like, there's no vacuum that we can analyze these things in. So all we can really do is like theorize about like the nature nurture, like which one is stronger, which one leads the other one, like this kind of thing, right? Possible Person says the interplay there is really hard to disentangle when it comes to Marxism. Yeah. So, but she's basically saying, like, at the time that she wrote this and with the research that she had done, she thought that Marxists basically didn't believe in any biological determinism when it came to patriarchy, or Marxist feminists, which is very interesting to me. On the other hand, I believe that the socialist feminists' revisions of Marxism are fundamental, requiring a rethink of every Marxist analysis, from domestic labor to imperialism. Later in the book, I shall provide the detailed argument necessary to support my claim that socialist feminism, although still in the process of development, is already a distinct and comprehensive as well as an illuminating and useful theory of women's liberation. It's very interesting to me. I've always wanted to get into womanism on this channel, partially because I'm Canadian. So when I think about like the most marginalized women in my country, I think about like Indigenous women obviously are like the first women I think about, but there's very few like Indigenous feminist texts that are like materialist. And I'm not trying to say that like I would discount the works and experiences and thoughts of an Indigenous feminist who is not materialist. But like I said on this channel before, it's like if I disagree with someone on something, or if I don't understand someone on something, I want it to be on the basis of something that I can like actually like challenge or interrogate or research. And when it's not materialist, I don't think I can do that. So I basically feel like womanism or black feminism is like one of the biggest black holes in my feminist knowledge. I've read some bell hooks, and that's about it. Yeah. So I've always wanted to get into that stuff, but I basically feel like I need to understand more fundamental feminist stuff before I can get there. I don't know, like realistically, I can only really read 3-ish books a year on this channel. It's what I've been doing the last couple years. So I think it's this bridge called My Back, unless that's a magazine that I'm confusing. But it's like an anthology of essays by Black women, unless I'm confusing with a different book. Let's mute myself for a second. Okay, it's not just Black women. This bridge called My Back is an anthology of essays by women of color who are radical feminists, or radical women of color, it says. I think it's like ridiculously long, which is also why it was... Oh no, it's 260 pages. That's not that insane. So I kind of thought that would be like a good like first step into like women of color feminism, rather than all this stuff which so far has been by white women or Jewish white women, you know what I mean? But I think that this book might be the first book that we read, like my iPad, you know, the Alison book that I have on here, might be the first book that we read to like step outside of radical feminism. I guess we've already kind of done that because we've been reading like lesbian separatist theory, but it's seemed kind of a natural place to go for me, as I prioritize lesbians. The reviews of this bridge called My Back are so good. There's a bunch of women on here who are like, I read this book in my 20s and now I come back in my 50s to read this book again and it means something different to me and blah blah blah. Like, it looks pretty great. Yeah. Anyway, so at the same time though, I did want to read something fucking Canadian on the channel because we've never done that, and I'm Canadian. There's this book called The House That Jill Built, which I think is kind of similar to Eden Built by Eves, which is the first book by Bonnie J. Morris, but it's like the Canadian version. It's like about the building of lesbian community in Canada in the 70s and 80s, I think. It's like someone's PhD thesis that has been published as a book. So I kind of want to read that on the channel just because it's Canadian and we've never done anything Canadian on this channel. It's hard to find Canadian things. There's a really good book called Not Sacred, Not Squaw by Cherry Smiley. It's Cherry Smiley, right? Oh my god. Yeah, it is Cherry Smiley. Oh my gosh, okay. And it's like from like last year. It's about like indigenous feminism, mostly to do with like sex trafficking and commercial sexual exploitation of indigenous women in Canada, which is really, really good. But it's like contemporary. She's still around. I don't want to like steal her book and read it on the internet, you know. But I would like to read more Canadian stuff because I am Canadian and like, you know, that's kind of like should be like my focus, you know. So yeah, I guess I'm just rambling now. I want to read this book. I think also it's only 8 essays, so I think we could read it in like a month or two. Not sure what book we're going to read after this Marilyn Frye book. You guys remember originally I was like, we're going to switch between like theory, history. We haven't really been doing that. We've just been reading theory since The Disappearing Elle. So I don't fucking know. Like the house that Jill built, that's the like Canadian book about the formation of the like lesbian community in Canada. That would be history, not theory. So I was kind of thinking we should read that next. I did find it on thrift books for like $15, which is great because a lot of the time when academic dissertations are published into books, they become like they're like so freaking expensive, like $90. Anyway. Yes, Kitty Cat is saying Cherry Smiley has a feminist website. It's called what is it called? WLRN. No, it's not WLRN. It's called WMST. Women's Studies Online. That's what her website. It's like a group of women where they have like consciousness raising groups and like reading groups and like so you can like do a lot of cool stuff. And it's really accessible. They'll be like, this is what we're going to study this week. And then they send you like a PDF that has like all the essays in it. And they'll send you like an email that has all the links. So you can like listen to the podcast. Like it's really, really accessible the way that they do stuff. And I think it's like the most accessible feminist education tool that there is. So they have like scheduled consciousness raisings and scheduled like study groups. And then you show up like once a week and it's like you read the essay and all the essays are like only a few pages long and all the podcasts are like under an hour. And so it's like really accessible. You just need to basically find like an hour a week to do the reading or listen to the podcast. And then you like meet up for an hour or two once a week to talk about it. It's really accessible and great. It's called WMST, Women's Studies Online. Yeah, Cherry, that's like what she's doing now as far as I can tell now. She's done her PhD, which is pretty great. I'm sure she's doing other stuff, but I mean like, yeah. Which talks, a lot about like colonization as it pertains to yeah. All right. We're not really talking about the essay anymore. This is kind of turned into like a Maria Miles is free online. Well, then I'm going to download it onto my iPad right now. I have like a back catalog of PDFs on my iPad of like feminist books to read. I also have this other one that's about like sex trafficking that looks really interesting. Probably not for YouTube. Not too much graphic stuff on here, but I've read part of Cherry Smiley's book, like the first like 5 chapters, because I was at someone's house and they had it, but then I couldn't take it with me. And last I checked, it's like kind of prohibitively expensive. I think it's like $30 for the book or something, but like plus shipping. I'm basically counting on the way I have most of my books is when somebody is downsizing or moving or like getting rid of their books, friends of friends always tell them like, hey, give your books to Benji. So I'm kind of hoping that I just get a copy of it that way. And then that's when I'll finish reading it. Or I could probably take it out of the library. I don't know. I have to check if my local library has. Oh my gosh, guys, I need to make a video about this. Every single feminist should have a library card. And every single one of those feminists should make, like, I'm going to make a video about this, should make, like, a schedule to be, like, once a week, I'm going to take out a feminist book. Even if I don't read it, I want the library to have a record that this book is being taken out. And also what you can do is you can, like, request, not interlibrary loans. It's different depending on which library you're a part of, but you can request for a library to buy a book if you want access to it. So I need to make, like, a how-to video of, like, things that women should be doing to make sure that their free, locally accessible books are feminist, because there's a lot of stuff that I consider to be, like, boilerplate feminist literature that is, like, actually kind of hard to access. And if you just had, like, 3 feminists in every city doing this, I think it would make, like, a substantial difference in, like, what is accessible at your local public library. And also, like, let's support libraries because books and all that, public institutions that are good for women. Also, libraries are just great for women. They have a lot of them have, like, mother groups for mothers, have, like, education for helping you get jobs and stuff. Like, I think a lot of women should get more involved. I have very passion about libraries. I love libraries. I would love to be a librarian. I would love to get my master's in library science, but, like, that's never going to happen. I would love to do, like, either a master's of library science specializing in, like, historical books written by women, or to do, like, a master's of, like, music history specializing in, like, the publication of, like, the writings of women's music, like, pre the time that they were published. Because there's entire places in Europe, this is, like, really off topic now, there's entire places in Europe where they have, like, archives of sheet music that no one has ever, like, scanned or read or put into, like, a modern typeset, that no one has ever performed. And they're just, like, sitting in these fucking archives. And I bet you there's a bunch of stuff in there that's written by women, even if we don't know about it. And, like, maybe I'm kind of, like, insane, but I would love to do, like, a master's or a PhD on that. It's never going to happen because we're never going back to school, because that shit is, like, so dumb. I don't have money and time for that. But yeah. Nix is 13 says, I highly recommend the channel Radical Anthropology. Interesting research on the origins of patriarchy, and they got in trouble at one point for being too turfy. Very interesting. That is very cool, Apostle Person. Yeah. Hey, Kat. Yeah, the house that the book that I was talking about, the Canadian one, I think it's, like, mostly focused in the prairies, which is interesting to me, which I'm sure you would find interesting, unless you finally flee the prairies. Unless you're a different woman than I think you are, but I'm pretty sure that you are who I think you are, and you live in Manitoba. Okay, that's it for the stream today. Tomorrow we are going to read the next chapter, and then I will be off for a week. So I'm gonna, like, put out my schedule for, like, the week of the 19th, the week of the 18th, like, this week, because I'm gonna be off for the next, like, the week after. So I'm putting, like, the week after. You know what I'm saying? Okay. So great to see you all as usual. I'm gonna put the link to this book in these 2 live streams. Oh, Momo time. Well, let me go find Momo. 1 second. Woo-woo. Say hello. Purr for the microphone. Now, you might think that she looks angry, but actually, she's basically unconscious with her eyes open. Right, Momo? Yeah, she has no idea what she's, like, on asleep. See, look at her new collar. It has little spaceships and planets on it. And it glows in the dark. Okay. I'm going to put her back on my bed. I will see you all tomorrow at the regular time, which is noon Eastern time, 9 a.m. Pacific time, 5 p.m. GMT. All right. I'll see you all tomorrow. Bye.